Sweet. Well, welcome everybody to a webinar here with the Elevar team and the Navi team. We're going to focus in on GA4 and a report that'll allow you to dive into your on-site performance, ultimately help your conversion optimization efforts. And so I'm not going to go into introductions yet. I want to get to kind of the core reasons why you're here. Make sure that you actually want to stay here for the full entire hour and it's not just another webinar that at the end of it, you're like, why the heck did I come? That was a waste of time. We really want this to be educational and actionable so you can actually have something to run with for 2024 and really help your CRO efforts and demystify some things around that in GA4. So while you're here, the first problem that we see most commonly is a lot of brands don't know where to focus their CRO efforts. We have a lot of conversations with brands, with e-com brands, and there's just there's so much noise in the e-com space with what you should be doing with your on-site experience, what you should be doing for CRO. It can be quite distracting. And so there's a struggle to really focus. As a result, you're not seeing or feeling the impact of your CRO efforts, or you fear there's hidden issues that you don't know, right? That you're not finding, you're trying these things, but it's not actually moving the needle. But you know that you've got a high CAC. You need to look at the on-site performance because it's not just your marketing channels that aren't performing. Your on-site performance is playing a pivotal part of that. And so that's one of the core problems that we hear consistently is I don't know where to focus our CRO efforts. The second thing here is struggling to adopt GA4. This one over and over again, we hear about it. I'm sure the Elevar team hears about it. You can't find the same reports that you had right out of the box with Universal Analytics, explorations, the learning curve for that. Setting up those custom reports is really difficult to make that jump when you've got a billion other things that you're doing. And so we're going to touch on that a little bit, help with this single report that we utilize so that you can actually have an exploration that tells you how your on-site performance is and be able to better adopt GA4. And then the last thing here is not trusting GA4 data. So you've got discrepancies. Common issues that we see is attributions out of whack. You've got 90% new users, way less returning users than you've typically had. So that doesn't look right. You're missing data points. You can't see the checkout journey, a variety of different things, or at the worst, like your purchases or your revenues way off. We see that all the time. And that obviously leads to a lack of trust in GA4. And it pretty much makes the tool useless, right? If you can't trust the data, it makes it really hard to be data-driven and to utilize Google Analytics. So those are the three core problems that we consistently see around CRO, around GA4. And so what ultimately we want you to get out of this, and we hope you get out of this, is the ability to focus your CRO efforts using GA4, right? Focus is key to maximizing the impact that you have with your CRO efforts. The next thing is how to use GA4 funnel explorations for CRO. And so we've got this single report that you can build out in a funnel exploration to understand your on-site performance. You're going to continue to learn that, yes, GA4 sucks, but it sucks mostly out of the box. If you're able to get familiar with explorations and utilize that, there's a lot of value that GA4 can provide for you. But if you're just using the out-of-box reports, that's going to be something that it's not going to give you what you need. It's not going to be very actionable. And then the last thing is here, which we see this a lot, is a lot of brands are like, GA4 is not working for us. Let's go adopt a new analytics platform. That's not the answer. You're going to have to adopt that. You're going to have to learn that, bring that on. GA4 is the future. It's not perfect, but it's a great tool that you should be leveraging. And so with this single report, we hope to help you focus your CRO efforts, understand how your site is performing. So why listen to us? So I'll go ahead and introduce the eNavi team here. I'm Anthony, founder and CEO. We've got Sheldon, our head of growth. We are a customer-first CRO agency for Shopify stores. Ultimately, what we do is we solve data-backed problems with solutions found through customer research. And so, a couple reasons why to listen to us is both Sheldon and I were in-house. We know what it's like to be pulled 1,000 different ways, to wear multiple hats, and have to try to do CRO, have to try to adopt new tools. And so we've been through that and have a lot of empathy for you guys. The next thing is we hated GA4 at first too, right? So we had to adopt GA4 internally at Enavi. Since we're super data driven, Google Analytics has been core to our process. And so when the transition from UA to GA4 happened, we had to learn it. We had to take courses. We had to figure it out. So we've gone through this experience before. Can't say we love GA4, but we've made it work for us. And in the same process that we're about to show today, we've used to provide tangible growth for a lot of different Shopify stores. The last thing here is we love to educate. We're really big on sharing. And so if you follow either of us on LinkedIn, you know that we like to share our process. And today's report and the process that we're going to go through is very core to what we do at Enavi when it comes to conversion optimization. So that's the Enavi team. I'll turn it over here to John, and he'll introduce himself and Elevar.
Thanks, Anthony. So I'm John Cairo. I'm the solutions engineer at Elevar. Been with Elevar for a couple years. Been working in D2C ecom for about 10 years. Had several Shopify businesses. Many of them got sold. And then I got really interested in tagging and tracking, and it kind of came too late because it has such a big impact on e-commerce stores, and didn't really realize the impact until I started working at Elevar. So Elevar for the last 6 years has been focused on many details that nobody really knows about. And those details all add up to making sure that what's happening on a site is reflected in platforms like Google Analytics and Facebook ads and many other channels we're connected to. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what we do. We're a positive ROI company, and we can help particularly in cases like this with GA4, and we'll talk about how later. But in a nutshell, that's Elevar and me. Anthony, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Cool. So now we're going to get into the meat. We're going to talk about a 5-step process here. This process will help you have a more impactful CRO efforts, and it's broken up into 5 simple steps. And so the first step here is measure. So the biggest thing here is making sure that we're measuring the right metrics, not only when we're judging the performance of our conversion optimization efforts, but also when we're analyzing data and trying to find opportunities. So we have a lot of brands that come to us and ask, like, is my conversion rate good? And it's really hard to use global conversion rate as something to kind of judge how you're doing from a CRO perspective, how your on-site store is performing. There's just way too many variables. Traffic quality, traffic splits, seasonality, all of that can influence conversion rate, and you'll just see over time it dips, it changes just drastically, right? And so ultimately it's just a vanity metric, right? It tells you nothing. And worst case scenario, don't be the guy here in the mirror who's thinks he's got a great conversion rate, but in reality, the on-site performance is performing really bad. And so being able to look at it a little bit more granularly and breaking up the conversion rate into the steps of the funnel, right? And so there's 4 core steps, 4 core metrics that we use, and what we call the intra-site funnel. And so we use the intra-site funnel to measure performance, right? And so measuring is really key to being able to maximize your CRO efforts, measuring the right things. The second thing here is focus, right? We need to focus in on a particular area, right? We can't do everything. Far too often, I see brands trying to do way too much with their CRO efforts. They get pulled too many different directions, and they don't know how to really focus and prioritize. And so that's where this whole idea, the metric on fire, comes in. And so we believe that every store has one. right? So there's a fire that's burning in the background, hindering growth. It's not just going to magically go away unless you intentionally address it, right? And so every day that you don't address it, you're going to be losing money. And the intra-site funnel allows us to identify that metric on fire. For some stores, there's multiple metrics on fire, and that's where you prioritize on the one that has the biggest opportunity. But with every store, there's a metric on fire, and that allows us to focus. And so I'm going to dive in a little bit here into the intra-site funnel, kind of talk through what that is and how it helps us focus effort. So the intra-site funnel is pretty much the product journey, but on steroids. So it's the 4 steps of the shopping journey. And we're measuring each of these independently. And then it's benchmarked against other e-commerce stores. We've got dozens and dozens of stores to benchmark against to create these target baselines to understand where we're under indexed. And then that allows us to identify the metric on fire and ultimately focus our efforts. And so these are the 4 metrics. The first one we have here is landing to product view. On each of these slides, we've got kind of the starting step of the funnel, of this step in the funnel, and then the ending goal, right? And so this is anybody that lands on the site, the percentage of users that land on the site and view a product. We've seen this be a metric on fire for 72% of the stores that we've audited this year. We call it product discovery issue. Users land on the site, they're not getting to a product page. Maybe they're not even getting beyond the home page, or they're getting to a collection page and they're bouncing. A lot of times it's because we're not, the store isn't quite getting into the mind of the customer and helping them think through the shopping process like they want to think about it. And it's just causing a lot of confusion, and they're bouncing before they even get to a product page. And so that's the first metric here, landing to product view. We're trying to hit 50 to 70% of users are getting to a product view. The next thing here is product view to add to cart. So this would be the percentage of users that add to cart, that get to a product page and add to cart. And so that's the second metric. The third metric, add to cart to checkout. Target range is 40 to 60%. This is the percentage of users that add to cart, that begin checkout, that add to cart, right? And so a user doesn't need to reach the cart page or see the cart drawer. All they need to do is take the action of adding to cart. We're just looking at the percentage of those users that added to cart that actually checked out, right? And the last thing here is checkout to purchase. And so we're looking at users that began checkout, the percentage of those that purchased. Shopify makes it really nice, since most stores have a very similar checkout, either the 3-step, or in some cases, you're now on the single page. Either way, this typically isn't a huge issue that we see for a lot of brands. And when there is an issue, it's oftentimes related to additional fees with shipping that a customer didn't anticipate, and so they end up bouncing. But a lot of stores tend to perform well here unless there's some hidden fees around shipping or payment methods that a user would expect and they don't have. And so those are the 4 steps of the intra-site funnel. And then after you have these steps here, you're measuring with the intra-site funnel, you're focusing your efforts on that metric on fire. Now it's time to prioritize, right? And so context is really key to understanding data. We can have a single data point, let's say landing page to product view is underperforming. That in itself doesn't tell us a lot. But when we can go in and look at segments and gather a bunch of context around that particular metric, like how our mobile users performing, paid social, that'll give us a better picture, right? We can then leverage those segments or dimensions, as GA4 calls it, to gather more context, to know what to prioritize, to be able to dive further and to identify what could be the root cause problems that are causing this fire, right? And so that's where the master list is what we call it. The master list comes in here. It helps us prioritize our effort. So I want to talk through the master list. it's a big old table here with a bunch of data. And so I'm going to go through it a little bit so you kind of understand exactly what we're looking at. The first thing here is right there in the top right, that first row is the 4 steps of the intra-site funnel. The next thing here is your benchmarks. So these are the target rates that we're looking to hit for each of the intra-site funnel metrics. And then we've got the actual segments, right? So device type, landing page, channel, user type, location. These are the primary ones that we utilize. There are other segments that you could look at too, but these would be the ideal starting point, and what we'd recommend for most brands to start with. And then you've got the percentage of sessions, right? So this will tell you how big that particular fire is, right? And so if we're looking at this example and we see mobile, only 35.9% of sessions are getting from a landing to product view, right? And we're trying to hit 50% there. So that's definitely under indexed. That would be a metric on fire. We can also see related to this that with landing pages, the homepage and the pages landing pages, that makes up about 40% of sessions, and both of those are under indexed when it comes to that 50% target baseline. And then the last one there, we can also see 41% of the traffic is paid and 41% land on the site and get to a product view when it comes to paid. So that's a lot of money you're spending, and those users are not getting to a product page. And so that's the master list. See, it helps you to give you context. Like we know, okay, we're underperforming. 36% of users are getting to a product that land on the site. Now we have a better understanding of where the issues lie, right? Homepage, pages, paid traffic, across the board here, they're underperforming. But this gives us more context, allows us to dive into the next step, which is to uncover those root cause problems, right? So when we know there's a fire, we need to ultimately find what are the problems that are causing this fire, right? And one of the things that's really key to maximizing your CRO efforts is solving data-backed problems. And so when we can uncover these data-backed problems based off of what we've found in the intra-site funnel analysis, that allows us to actually bring out solutions, right? We can double down on research focused in this area, right? Landing to product view is struggling. We can see the different segments that it's struggling with. We can double down our research in those areas, actually identify what the problems are, develop solutions, and then as a result, we're going to test against data-backed problems. Instead of just a best practice or something a competitor's doing, we have a real data-backed problem, and that's going to increase the likelihood that not only our tests win, but that we're making a significant impact, providing long-term sustainable growth with our CRO efforts. And so root cause analyzing a fire will identify all kinds of data-backed problems. And I'm going to touch on briefly kind of how to uncover these data-backed problems. So the first thing you do is you start with context, right? And so if we're continuing with this example, we want to know where those users are coming from, right? So we can see that users that land on the homepage, there's like 36% of those are actually getting to a product page. So let's get some more context. What channels are those users coming from? Let's say they're coming from paid social. What are those ads that they're seeing? Is there cohesiveness between the ads and the landing page? Let's gather as much context as we can about the user, where they're coming from, what they're seeing, what they're landing on. Are they new? Are they returning? That can help us uncover the why, the actual problems that are taking place. And then the next thing we'll do is what's called a heuristic analysis. It's a complicated name, but in its simplest form, it's a step-by-step analysis to understand usability and identify issues, right? And so we're going to take that context and we're going to say, okay, the user sees this ad, they land on this page. Is there cohesiveness between that? We'll kind of walk through that page, the action that we're trying to influence, right? So we're trying to get the user to get to the product page. We're going to walk through that funnel everything that it takes to get up to that point. Is there any friction points? Is there any usability issues? Is there anything else that you'd want to track more of, to understand more of? Let's say, okay, let's get some enhanced tracking on the navigation to understand how users are interacting with that. Is that positively influencing users getting from the home page to a product page? Or is it actually negative? Do we need to optimize the navigation? And so the heuristic analysis can allow you to see it through the eyes of the customer as best you can with the context that you know. And then the last kind of other ways to research, there's so many different ways to really dive into it, but you've got quantitative analysis. Custom event tracking is really helpful here to give more context. Qualitative analysis allows you to hear it from the customer with customer surveys, review mining, interviews, user testing, a variety of different means there. And so when it comes to quantitative analysis, I wanted to flip it over to John here, and he can talk through how Elevar really helps with enhanced tracking, custom event tracking, so you can actually trust your data, because that's super important when we're looking at this intra-site funnel. Some of you are going to go in and do this, and your data might look wonky, and that's probably because your tracking's not set up properly. And so it's super important to have Elevar there to really help with accurate data, so that you can not only do this, but then be able to uncover the problems.
Thanks, Anthony. So there's a bunch of gobbledygook on this slide, but I'm just going to kind of skip most of it and give you guys a scenario. Most merchants assume that if they have their GA4 tracking set up in Shopify, what happens on the site is going to be reflected in GA4. And I think that's a very reasonable assumption. You assume that if you connect a tool that does the tracking for you, it works. And I think one of the big realizations that all of our clients have had is that's actually not the case. It's not binary. It's not either working or not working. It's a spectrum. And unless you've put a lot of effort into figuring out how to make it work perfectly, things will not be reflected like you think they will be. So Anthony's been talking about users a lot. And let me give you, for instance, if you had a user, let's say they're in Safari, and they come from, let's say, a Facebook ad. So somebody clicks on a Facebook ad, they come to your site in Safari, they land, cruise around a bit, leave, and then in 24 hours or more come back. That user isn't going to look like one user. They're going to look like two. So in all this reporting that Anthony's showing, things aren't going to add up. You're going to think you're losing people where you probably aren't. And never mind the context of CRO, but once we go outside the context of CRO and just talk about attribution, that user they may purchase, but they're not going to look like they came from Facebook, which is basically a disaster, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out what's happening on the site and then reflect it in the tools that we're using. So that's what Elevar helps with. And all these points are kind of to my point. But the big picture is, let's make sure that everything that happens on the site is in your marketing and ad channels, and marketing and analytics channels. And just one last point here, Elevar can help a lot with custom event tracking. So if you're unsure, as you spiral down into the CRO process and you want to focus on a particular feature and understand whether it's being used or not, it's really important to tag that up so that information's in Google Analytics or another platform too. And Elevar is a resource for you to help you do that. We have tools that help do that. And we, as a software, can also help you do that. We're going to talk a little bit more about this at the end, but Anthony, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Cool. Thanks, John. So the last step we have here in the process, at this point, we're measuring properly, right? We've focused our efforts on that metric on fire. We've prioritized and gathered context through the master list. We are uncovering the problems that are causing this fire. And now you should have some ideas about how we can solve for the problems that we've identified, right? And that's where validating comes in place, right? We need to validate, did we actually make an impact? In order to really put out the fire, we need to validate that our solutions are working, right? And so that's where A/B testing is key. Without it, you're kind of guessing as to whether you made an impact. And so empirical data is huge here. We can validate that our efforts are making a quantifiable impact on the problems, on the fire, and so that's the last step here. There's amazing tools out there for A/B testing. The one that we love to use is Convert. It's super easy to use. There's no fluff. The pricing is great. Seamless integration with Shopify. There's a link here for a 30-day free trial. It's our go-to with all of our clients. But like I said, there's many other A/B testing tools out there that do a great job too. And so I'm going to wrap up kind of the 5 steps here, and then I'm going to turn it over to Sheldon, who's going to talk through how to set this up in GA4 and actually show you the 5 steps in action so you can see how it was applied. But again, we talked about measuring the right things, and that's how we do that with the intra-site funnel, right? And then focusing efforts with the metric on fire, right? And we can do that with the intra-site funnel. It's going to highlight fires where we're underperforming, where we're under-indexed, and then prioritizing efforts with context from the master list, and then uncovering data-backed problems that are causing this fire, right? We know there's a fire, but just because there's a fire doesn't mean we know what the problems are. We need to discover those problems, and that's going to require quantitative and qualitative research to really get down to the root cause. And then hopefully after step 4, you're seeing the problems, you're able to put together some ideas and validate with testing, right? Making sure that your solutions are making an impact, not just pushing them live, because 9 out of 10 times it's probably going to be detrimental to the user experience, whether it actually provides an impact or doesn't provide an impact at all. You can see that through A/B testing, and so that's really key to make sure that the changes you're making are actually improvements and helping impact that metric on fire that you've identified. So that's the 5 steps in maximizing the CRO process. I'm going to turn it over to Sheldon here. He's going to talk through setting up this in GA4.
Sweet. Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, let's get going here. Now that we've talked about doing all this stuff a lot, I want to walk through what it actually looks like to set this up. What are we looking for? And then, as Anthony alluded to, we'll walk you guys through like an actual real life example from really Q2 on of this year with one of our clients. So I want to kick over the next slide. Sweet. So for all of the hand wringing and the difficulties with GA4, and there are a lot, this is the one thing that I think GA4 does exceptionally well, and that is the funnel explorations. So for those of you who haven't used it, this is a screenshot took from the Google Merch Shop, which is kind of their demo account. So all you're doing, explore, opening up a funnel exploration, and that will get you a page that looks roughly like the next slide here. So this is more or less what it will look like when you come in. This is the finished product, but we'll walk through kind of step by step. There's a lot of things that come in pre-populated, segments, dimensions, metrics, steps, all of that. It's a little overwhelming. For the most part, you can delete the majority of it. So Anthony, want to go to the next one here? The way we approach this, and generally you can get this thing set up in 2 minutes flat if you get comfortable with it. First thing you do, we're adding funnel steps. Like that is the core thing, and we're intentionally adding only 2. So rather than try to add the whole thing at once, like in the purchase journey report, we really like to isolate variables and look at it exclusively from step 1 to step 2, and not have to worry about people entering or exiting the funnel and accounting for that or understanding why that is. So when you're adding those funnel steps, you click the little edit icon within the or next to the steps button there, and then next slide. Pops up a screen like this. In this case, for 4 of the 5 steps here, we're using the straight e-commerce steps. So it's like view item, add to cart, begin checkout, purchase. That is very intentionally done so that it plays nicely with as many of the different dimensions and metrics as possible. As you get into GA4, if you haven't noticed already, things don't always map the way that you think they would. And sometimes you have to use some workarounds and a whole bunch of different metrics to just to get this set up. But this gives you the best shot at understanding and being able to slice up your data exactly how you want. And again, we'll reiterate, 2 steps max here. Once you go above and beyond that, it gets murky. You can misinterpret data. You can get errors that you don't know are errors. Nothing good comes from it. So keep it to 2. Next slide. And then once you do that, once you have step 1 to step 2 done, we'll go in, we'll either duplicate a slide, add a tab, but we use the tabs to separate it for each of these metrics so that we have one for landing the product view to add to cart, so on and so forth. And that way you can have the same dimensions, you got the same metrics, you can look at it the same ways, but you never have to worry about, again, people entering or exiting the funnel, errors like that. It keeps it as clean as possible. So next slide there, Anthony. So once you guys have the tab or the steps set up, the way you can make this sing is dimensions. There are so many different ways you can add this in. These are the 5 that we use almost all the time. These are the ones that were in the master list. They provide you probably the biggest swath of frequently used problems. So you can add those in pretty easily. You can add or subtract as much as you want. This is our recommended starting point. When you want to apply one, all you're doing, double clicking, and it will drop it in. It'll show it up as a breakdown. So in this case, we had a device category. That way it's just showing that there are the different performances of product view to add to cart by desktop, mobile, tablet, apparently even smart TVs. It just gives you that quick little breakdown as different rows. And you can actually kind of see here, actually go back real quick, Anthony. 1 point, as an example, desktop and mobile, there is about a 17% difference in the completion rate there. That's the sort of thing we're looking for. When you see that, like there are some pretty serious issues in this hypothetical Google Merch shop. That's the sort of thing that you can identify so quickly, so easily, and really focus your efforts. So I'm going to the next slide. And then if you do want to go a layer deeper, which is almost always the case, filtering becomes pretty important. You can use this to apply those dimensions. So say in this case, we want to understand how users who come directly to the site operate on different devices. Like, is their experience different? And in this case, when it comes to add to cart rate, it is same thing. Desktop does great, mobile does terribly. So that tells us directionally something's up with the mobile experience. Let's dive deeper and really start to diagnose that problem. So that is really, in a nutshell, this can all be done. And once you get good at it, in literally like 2 minutes tops. I have done this enough times now that, yeah, I can confidently say that. Once you know what to look for, it is so easy to get in, get a quick data point, and get out, that this has become really the staple way of how we use GA4. Probably 80 to 90% of our time is spent in reports just like these for different clients. So next slide. All that being said, we do make it easy for you guys. So what we have here is a Looker Studio template that takes that intra-site funnel report and all of the data that we just showed you how to set up. You can shortcut that as quick and easy as it is. If you don't even want to mess with that, you can use this report, go in, scan a QR code. We'll also follow up with it. All you're doing is selecting your site from the dropdown of sites you have access to, and it will populate every one of these metrics. It will identify a metric on fire, show you the relative underperformance of it, and then anything that's in red down below, that is below a target rate and something that you should really look a little bit closer on and prioritize with your efforts. So this is one we strongly encourage you to use it. At some point, we are charging for this thing, but for anyone on this call, you guys are getting it for free. So we've spent a lot of time and invested a lot of time to get this thing built. We haven't seen anything like it out there anywhere. So we hope you guys enjoy it and it can provide value. Because I genuinely think if you guys open this up, used it, by the end of the day, you could probably have a totally different view of your data, of your site's performance, and where you should be focusing going into 2024 than you did when you started today. So strongly encourage you guys to check it out. And if you have any questions about it or things get a little bit wonky with it, it happens sometimes, hit us up after the fact. We are happy to go through, talk through potential reasons for why you might be seeing different stuff. So yeah, that's our Looker template. And now let's go into these 5 steps in a very real life scenario. So next slide. So this is a anonymized client of ours that we started working with in Q2 of this year. So they came to us. They had done a site redesign 3-4 months previously and had seen some performance issues. They weren't quite sure why. So we started to diagnose based on this approach. And this is the baseline data that we had from Q1 of this year. And as you can kind of see, product view, add to cart, pretty good. Add to cart to checkout, also pretty good. Both are at or above our target range. Checkout to purchase is a little low. It's something we kept an eye on, but they're at a pretty high AOV, high price point cookware brand. So that isn't uncommon. And that's where we have like the benchmarking. We felt pretty confident that that was more just a quirk of having high price point items versus anything that was truly wrong with the site. But the big issue that we saw abundantly clear, landing the product view rate, that came through as massively underperforming. Seeing this at 34% and trending actually downward from there is like, that was a warning sign. And that was like, okay, we need to get this squared away and put all of our resources on that. And that's what we've been working on for the last 2.5 quarters at this point, basically. So I'm gonna go next slide. Yeah, key findings here. When we actually looked at the master list and really tried to analyze these segments to understand what was going on, a couple of really key trends emerged pretty quickly. The first one was that direct traffic were simply not viewing products. Internally, we view direct traffic as a proxy for pretty high intent users. I mean, it's someone who, assuming the tracking is correct, they are typing in your URL directly in the browser and going to the site. Very few people are going to do that casually. They have enough other things to be doing. So if they're there for a reason. If they are there for a reason and they're not actually viewing a product, that is concerning. And that is something we wanted to drill down on, which led to the second point. Homepage elements simply were not really pulling their weight. This was clear across navigation menus, the hero section, the next 2 or 3 sections below that. None of them, despite being a really important real estate on the site, they led to kind of painfully low levels of product views. And we were thinking that is absolutely not what we should be looking at or what we should be getting out of this part of the page. So we've done a lot of iterative testing there. We'll talk through that in a second, but that's something that stood out pretty immediately. Like, okay, this stuff is not earning its way onto the page. Let's make it better. And then lastly, collection pages simply, for the most part, we're not advancing users into product pages. So these PLP visitors were only about 1/3 of them were viewing a product, especially on mobile devices, which this is a mobile heavy site. I think it's 80 to 85%. This is really alarming, something that is just kind of criminal to have let lingered. So obviously need to drill down on that. So we use these findings to kind of craft the scope of our efforts. And there were plenty of other things that we could have done and optimized on this site. But for the most part, unless it was just straight up broken and worth doing as a just do it fix, we pushed it to the side. We did not prioritize it, and we focused on these elements. So slide. Our scope of testing, this has been true for really the last 2+ quarters now. When we see low landing to product rates, this is almost always a combination of these elements, and this is tracked across quite a few different client sites at this point. Again, for Shopify stores, 70+% are plagued by this. It is absolutely the most common thing that Shopify stores could improve on, and most people don't even know that it's an issue. So for our purposes, this is kind of the scope we defined. We wanted to actually make the navigation menu work for them, get that homepage, really sections like 1, 2, and 3 to drive as many product views as possible, and then get collection pages moving users through to a product page at a far higher rate. And figured if we could nail those 3 things, those are the biggest levers we could pull, and the results would kind of speak for themselves in terms of product views going up. So, few things that move the needle. We could go through quite a bit. I think we at this point have 9 or 10 9 or 10 implemented winning tests that have been statistically significant and validated that are now live on the site. These are a handful of them. So a couple of things that worked from the navigation menu, making product categories the top level of navigation. And if there is one thing I could like shout from a mountaintop, it is this. Sites that do this, everyone that we've done has been a double-digit increase in product views. And it's not always perfect the first time. Sometimes it requires a little bit of finesse or trimming down so that if you have 20 categories, you're focused on like 5 to 6 that are the most important. So it does require a little bit of nuance there, but man, that is massive. When we've implemented it here, our final permutation, this one, our most successful one, was a 21% increase in product views from users who use the navigation. That is titanic and something that could be very replicated very quickly for any brands who are on this call. That is something, start looking at this immediately. Similarly, we did things like reordering the menu based on revenue per session. We got really cool data once we implemented heatmap.com on this. That was really sweet, especially going into a promotional period in November, to be able to kind of strip out a few things that had not earned their way on the page that we otherwise would have had some like political pushback on. So being able to say like, hey, people aren't buying, people click on this, they don't end up buying, let's remove it. That also improves things. On the homepage itself, we did quite a bit, did a lot of headline and copy testing so that we have data that really validates the angles that are most important for a user. We could then apply that on their email marketing, on their ads, on custom landing pages. We're just able to validate, in this case, emphasizing the non-toxic nature of the products and the health benefits, way more important than anything else that they were talking about. So that gave us improvements on the homepage and abroad. Similarly, shopping by category, really common, really easy one. This one, compared to the section that predated that one, it was a 40% lift in collection views. Again, titanic lifts. Last thing here, once we actually got users to the collection page, this was something that, because it was a mobile heavy site, there were a lot of things that flat out were just designed for a desktop, and they did not play nicely with mobile. So we did a lot of things to make it like the product grid more friendly, get users into a product grid more quickly, simplifying whenever possible. In this case, one particular test of simplifying that product grid was about a 16% increase in product views, just from basically making it easier to find a product on a grid. So basic things that add up and compound in a way that you would be shocked by. So Anthony, let's go to the results here. So results-wise, it was a massive, massive improvement. This is one where we do like to always throw in the caveats. The ground is always shifting under our feet in e-commerce. It feels like these sites are always trying to go to zero on every metric. So we're kind of fighting upstream in a lot of ways. There's a lot of headwinds, but over the last 9 months or so, we've been able to validate quite a few test wins and get them implemented. So regardless of the baseline rate that we are using, it is a 25 to 26% increase in both landing to product view rates and average revenue per user. And this has been validated out just about every way we could possibly split it. But when we talk about driving the actual like clear impact of these changes, being able to prove that like, hey, we've done these 10 things, and as a result, you're getting 25% more revenue from every single user on site. That's a really cool thing to be able to go to a client and say. So that is one that's why we believe in this process. And these are the sorts of results that when we focus for 30, 60, 90 days on one thing, this becomes really possible. And that's why we operate the way we do. It's why I would encourage everyone on this call to operate largely in the same way if you guys see the value in it. So click on here, Anthony. So just to reiterate, for anyone who is looking to dive into this, take a look at this report. It is something, again, less than a minute, you guys can hop in and get some phenomenal levels of data you probably haven't seen before and see what's going on. Like, some stuff will probably surprise you. If it does, my email is actually on the report. Feel free to email me. If you can't tell, I love talking about this stuff. I will happily go back and forth with you guys and help make sense of some of the context, because that's always what we're looking to do here, is provide additional layers of context in a really digestible way so that you guys can prioritize things, actually implement some solutions, and then see some true measurable performance increases for your site.
Cool, thank you, Sheldon. I'll turn it over here to John and can talk through an Elevar offer here.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say what a great framework this is. You always hear about people talking about data activation and like what to do, even if you have good data. And this is just such a clear-cut path to like where to focus. So cheers to you guys for putting together such a cool little framework. So back to Elevar for a second. Big thing, try us out. There's no contract. You can try us for 15 days for free. We're offering a 50% off our expert install, which we don't do ever for this seminar. So sign up with us. If there's one channel that really impacts you a lot, like in this case, if it's GA4, you can just turn on GA4, leave all your other tagging and tracking as it is, and you can compare us, A/B us, and see if it's worth it. I can tell you that many of the top 20 Shopify stores on the planet use Elevar. There's a reason people use Elevar. It helps a lot. Everything we do is ROI positive. I have a real small little chart that's probably hard to read here, but this is just one example. If you do email marketing, here's an example of us increasing revenue for one of our clients over the last 6 months on a Klaviyo campaign by $55,000 just by turning us on. So we can make a big difference in your store. That's it from us.
Cool. Well, let's answer some questions here. I think some questions have come through. And so we wanted to leave a little bit of time to answer some questions. The first one that I would love to touch on is data retention. And one of the issues that we see very often when we look at a GA4 account for a brand is they don't have their data retention set up to 14 months. And so it's set up to 2 months. And really what that means is when you're looking at this intra-site funnel report or doing any custom explorations, you don't have anything beyond that 2 months. It gets deleted at the user level data gets deleted, right? And so all you have is the standard reports. And so it's very important to turn that on. It's super simple to do. It'll take you 2 minutes. If you have any questions on setting that up, let me know. But that's one thing where data retention is important, and you should have 14 months automatically turned on. So like I said, if you don't have it now, do it immediately after this call.
Yeah, otherwise it's like Groundhog Day. Every time you look at the report, you have like a day, well, you have 2 months of data to go back on, but it's not a good situation, and it's such an easy fix. And like we were talking about earlier, 90% of merchants are set to 2 months. They just don't know about it. So it's a good one to touch on. Do you want me to take maybe the privacy one?
Yeah, I think this is a better fit for you and Elevar.
Okay, sure. So Christopher, tough question. I can't cover it all. If you want to email me or connect with me on LinkedIn, I can go over it at a deeper level. But in a nutshell, what Elevar does is we use Google Tag Manager's consent mode. Consent mode communicates the state of either being opted in or opted out to the tags in GTM and to Elevar servers, so that we know what tags should fire and what tags should not. In the case of Google, Google has this system they're working on. They have been for a while, where they send hits without cookies. They call them cookieless pings. The tags decide whether to do that based on consent mode in Google Tag Manager. And what you get if you do send these cookieless pings is not the complete picture, but you get a modeled picture. They have modeled data in GA4 and other associated tools, and you get more information than you would if the users were just opted out and not sending signal at all. So I'm going to leave that one there, but feel free to reach out and I can run you through all this stuff if you're interested. There's a couple other ones. Anthony, do you want to take either of these?
Yeah, so is it possible to leverage the GA4 BigQuery export to do the same thing? Yes, and I would say this would be the recommended approach for a lot of brands. If you are into, like, let's say 8 figures, even some brands that are in like the high 7 figures, you're going to have data sampling happening, and so you'll be seeing like 80% of the data. As you get further bigger and bigger, it's gonna be less and less data. And that's where using BigQuery will allow you to see all of the data. And so that would be the recommended approach here, is to utilize BigQuery and eliminate data sampling.
And that's just as easy as the flip of a switch, right, in terms of getting data into BigQuery?
Yeah. I mean, so you can set up an integration between GA4 and BigQuery, and then you can literally, that template that we have, you could swap out the data so it's pulling from BigQuery instead of GA4.
Cool. There's one on, maybe, do you want to take that one on the DM role? I think maybe it might be best to get to the last one that just came up. Paula, can you show it again?
Yeah.
So can Elevar help uncover the source of medium inside GA4 for digital marketing channels? Yes, a big part of that is based on some of the stuff I talked about with users and identifying returning users as returning users, but we're also really good at collecting data throughout the whole funnel that often goes missing. So for sure, you could expect an improvement in your source medium, all the attribution information in GA4 to keep it simple.
Yeah, John, one thing I'll add on that comment, this is one we get asked a lot of people not knowing how to find this data with the standard reporting within GA4. Like I said before, we throw out almost all the standard reporting and approach it from custom explorations. So either within like a funnel exploration or just one of those freeform ones, and you're using like a session source or session medium and kind of drilling down on it that way. It is not as easy as it was in Universal Analytics, but usually you can get something set up that works for you on a custom level and make sure everyone with access to the store can have it. And it's a good enough starting point to at least get you like some baseline data, so you're not totally flying blind, which we've talked a few clients off the ledge in the last 6 months or so on that. So totally understand the feelings there.